I'd like to welcome you all to our exclusive webinar for Anchor, the 5 key characteristics of high-performing nonprofit boards required for success. Dennis loves an exceptionally long webinar title, so I'm just going to leave that there.
Can't help us I'm from Jersey. What am I going to do? You know, Jersey.
Oh, just a couple of housekeeping things. I think everybody's used to using Zoom now. So we are recording this. So if you want to keep your microphone on mute, that'll help us with feedback and excess noise. There will be time for questions and answers at the end of the program. You can submit your questions on the chat icon, either publicly to everyone, or if you want to send it privately, you can send it to Dennis Miller-host. My name is Michelle, and those will come to me, and I'll make sure that Dennis hears everyone's question. We will circulate a recording of the webinar, including slides. So just give us a day or two to get that and to edit it. Welcome again to our webinar, 5 key characteristics of high-performing nonprofit boards required for success. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Dennis Miller, founder and president of Dennis Miller Associates. For those of you who may not have come across his work yet, he is a nationally recognized strategic leader and coach specializing in the nonprofit sector and the issues of nonprofit organizations. He has more than 30 years of experience working with board leadership and chief executives. He's an expert in board governance, fund development, philanthropy, succession planning. He is a there we go, there's my background noise. He is a 5-time author and a sought after speaker. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Dennis so that I can put myself on mute for a while.
By the way, I'm glad you said 30 years. You didn't say my truth of 40 years, so I feel much younger for you here today. So well, welcome everybody today. I appreciate you participating here. And let me just start out by saying I thank each and every one of you for the work that you do, for all those in need of your service for intellectual, physical, and developmental disabilities. It's a big passion of mine. I know Barbara Merrill quite well, and I'm very happy to be a strategic partner with them, an investor with them, and I've done work all over the country with people like yourselves here. So I'm going to start here. So there's 5 areas that I want to focus in on. High level of board and CEO engagement. These are things that I believe are absolutely required for success. And what I mean by that, I also want to make sure that 2 things. I'm taking every question you have, but certainly those of you that want to ask a question privately, I'm going to give you my email address. It's Dennis with 2 N's. Dennis at Dennis C as in Charles Miller.com. Dennis at DennisCMiller.com. If you send it to DennisMiller.com, there's actually a furniture store in Brooklyn that gets a lot of my emails. They don't put the C in and they wonder why they're going there. I'm going to talk about board recruitment best practices, which may be something that you haven't heard about from my approach about board recruitment. We'll see. Certainly the need ever more about creating a true culture of philanthropy and how you can probably change some mindsets there. It's only an issue about board leadership success. You know how challenging that can be sometimes for people to want to step up and not step up, and what are the challenges. And then last but not least here, so how to measure and evaluate the board's annual performance here. So those are the 5 areas that I want to focus in on. And so Michelle, if you can go to the first one here. So it sounds like most of these are really common sense. What's the meaning of high level board and CEO engagement? But I'm going to talk about, next slide, Michelle, just understanding the, and leave it for here. Leave it here. I want to go over actual research. Okay, no, right, stay right there. That's it. I want you to go over actual research and my experience of life cycles of boards. Now, there are 4 that have been very well documented, and you know most of these here. So the first one is a founding board. You know what that's like. Some organization gets founded, and Make-A-Wish gets founded. Susie Come gets founded. Somebody finds a hospital, finds a school for those with various disabilities, behavioral health care, etc. The challenge, obviously, with a founding board is sometimes the founding person can't leave, and you got founding surgery. But that's pretty self-explanatory. The second stage of board governance is what the legal responsibilities of boards are, and you're all very familiar with that. And certainly it's, overseeing the financial aspects of it, the compliance aspect, the audit aspects of it. And that's a requirement when anybody goes to get tax exempt status. Is basic fiduciary responsibilities. That's a legal requirement of being on a board. The third stage of governance, and this has been going on a long time, where boards evolved and became more business-like. So there was a business plan and a strategic plan that kind of developed here. And so for most boards operate someplace between levels 2 and 3 there. They have a fiduciary responsibility and they have a sort of a strategic business advisory role. But the role that is really important to have a high level of engagement with the board and CEO is a level of leadership. And this is where the board has a sense of, it's a very mature level, where the board has a sense of ownership as much as the CEO does, where they want to achieve your vision as much as you do, where it's not managing, it's not micromanaging, it's not, but it's where it's a true partnership where they are constantly bringing forth new ideas, perhaps challenging your thoughts or ideas, asking questions, always renewing the organization. But they feel it's not just, when the meeting is over, they will see you at the next month meeting or 2 months, whatever. It's an ongoing process of maturity where there's an equal partnership and where the board plays a role of leadership in conjunction with the CEO. And what you find is actually reaches that board members find it much more enjoyable and much more meaningful to them when they're functioning at the leadership partnership level with the CEO than just being a strategic advisor. Now, obviously, I always tell people, half kidding, there's 2 reasons you have a board. One is because it's legally required, but the real reason most people have a board because as a CEO, and I was a CEO many times, you can't do it by yourself. You need help of others here, and that's one of the core components of a nonprofit that help you achieve your vision, your goals here. But oftentimes it's passive. They give you advice, they may give you an evaluation, give you thoughts, but then they don't see you for another month or so, and that's hard to really build continuity. It's really hard to have a level of success. So just to kind of get started in terms of the 5 characteristics that I have experienced and seen that required for success is a high level of board and CEO engagement. Now, it also means the CEOs have to feel competent, secure, comfortable, allowing the board to kind of and invite them to be a partnership. It is the equivalency of, I'm going on my 40th year of marriage, and God bless my wife, she's been put up with me for 40 years, but it is, imagine if you're just 2 people living together and you just put your paychecks on the table every 2 weeks, and that was kind of what it was. But the marriage is a partnership. It's not just advice and showing up for dinner time, raising the kids, doing the taxes. It's a partnership. So this is something that for many of you, you probably know this. For others, you might not. But I would encourage this, and a perfect, great rule to adopt in how to engage my board is what I call the 50% rule, which means this. At every board meeting, on average, 50% of the time. Now, there are times when it's going to be 80%, times when it's 20, 60, 40, 40, 60. In addition to having your own CO report or committee reports, and committee reports are very important because a good board has a committee do its work, as you know that. Have at least one strategic question on the table for discussion at every board meeting. It could be a strategic issue that you're dealing with. When you're going to do it, could be something like this. Could you imagine saying, whether you do it up front of the meeting, at the end of the meeting, you imagine saying, listen, I want to call the meeting to order. I want to approve of last month's meetings. All in favor, say aye. Today, we're going to talk about the actual impact we're having in our community. Today, we're going to talk about, the value we provide to our community. Today, I want to have a discussion about what is our image in the community. And it's the job of the board chair or board president to change terms of interchangeable and yourself here to kind of have those kind of discussions. So there's a sense of ownership. So I want to keep repeating myself, but I think it's important in every organization that's successful, that's really successful. It's a strong partnership of leadership. And I think hopefully that's clear, but I think that is something that you should strive for. Okay, Michelle, next. So clearly that obviously it's a partnership that's built upon trust and respect. Everybody has their own space. It's not talking about the board's managing you, the board's micromanaging, the board has an office next door to you. None of that. It's just a reality of a relationship that you know as a CEO. And Leslie, I know you know, and others that, and I've been a CEO. It can be very lonely at the top of times, right, Leslie? It can be very lonely at times. When everybody can look at you and criticize you and make decisions for you, but at the end of the day, it's like the decisions are on your shoulders. And so, what you want to have is partners that you trust and respect. They give you the time here. Also, this relationship is whether it's a focus on results and achievements and measures. I always ask my clients all the time is, how do you measure your success? And I mean, what do you mean? Well, not just how do you measure the success of the organization, which is a good question, but how do you measure the success of the board? And so, without saying, we know the unbelievable tragedy as a country, as a world we're going into this year. It's been beyond horrible. But from that, there still is the need to have sort of where we at, what did we do well, and what do we can do better next year. A good CEO partnership, obviously, with a board is there's very open, honest communication, where the CEO can have a conversation with the board chair about maybe somebody on the board, or vice versa. And it's a shared sense of accountability and responsibility. So it's doing it, not just doing it yourself. And I've seen so many boards where they care about mission, but at the end of the day, the meeting's over and they don't show up for another month or two. And I always, I have all these silly terms because I've been at this for so long, but I thought about the tin cup theory, or the rubber band theory of a board member. Now, this is probably prior to electronic mail and everything, but you can imagine the days when you sent out a board package ahead of time in the mail, and you had the agenda and the minutes and maybe financial reports or a strategic plan wrapped in a little rubber band, and board member pulls their car into the parking lot, takes the packet out, sees the rubber band, takes the rubber band off. As they're walking into the meeting, they start to read the packet. No prior preparation whatsoever. And they go to the meeting, they don't say anything, and the meeting's over, they second a motion to something, and they go home and tell the spouse, honey, I'm going to be in the minutes for next month's meeting because I second a motion. That's the level of involvement. And so really the key here is to work with your board, and helping them wanting to become your partners. And you only can do that by inviting them to it. You can't do it on their own. And it's beyond the scope of today's session about the kind of board training that people need here. But I think it's safe to say that this is a crucial aspect that differentiates organizations that do okay versus those that are able to sustain their mission and build their strategic plan. So that's board, CEO, high level of engagement. Okay, next, Michelle. Now, recruitment best practices here. And so we can move the next slide. So a couple of things here. There is absolutely nothing wrong, by the way, nothing wrong with recruiting people nothing. And because we all want to have people that we know on a board and things like that. But here's what I believe in having in my own experience as, I didn't say it, my background was I was a healthcare executive. I said, for 25 years, I ran two major medical centers and a healthcare foundation. And I was also a corporate executive. My firm, we started 16 years ago. So there's nothing wrong with, talk about what we need on the board, okay? But before you get the skills, I think my suggestion to you is the following here. I want you to sit down sort of today, tomorrow, whatever, with yourself, with your board, and think about what, if you were starting your board today, you're building your board today, what would be the ideal competencies? And I'm going to define what they are, not skills. What would be the ideal competencies that you'd like to have on your board? So I'm giving you some suggestions here. An inspirational leader, an innovative strategic thinker, a decision maker, a collaborator, a brand builder, a change agent, et cetera, et cetera. These are competencies. Skills are things you learn on the job. Competencies are things that you learn to do well on the skills. So think about it. If you would think about what are the competencies would you like to have on the board ideally? Number two is take the step, and we'll get to see. Next step is, what are the competencies I have today? Not skills. What are the competencies I have today? So you could say, and the difference between the ideal board's competencies and the current board competencies becomes your gap. So move to the next slide if you can, Michelle. Again, personal characteristics or attributes are not the same as skills. So we'll get to that in a second here. It's not saying I need a doctor, I need a nurse, I need an attorney, I need a social worker, we'll get to that. And that's where most people focus in on. But I'm suggesting to you, as a suggestion, you know what, is focus first on competencies we need. I'll explain that in a second. Next slide, Michelle. Okay. So if you went along with my process and you had listed about a dozen or so competencies, and you identified the competencies, honestly, you had on your current board, and the third step is, what's the gap? So let's move to the next slide. So what's the gap? What's the difference? And let's assume, just hypothetically, the gap is that we don't really have a strategic thinker. I'm making this up, of course. Or we lack an inspirational leader. Or we don't have a strategic thinker. We don't have a change it. Let's just say that. Okay, so now that we're thinking about board recruitment, now we start talking to our board members. But hey, who do we know? Who do you know that is a good strategic thinker? Now I start talking to the Chamber of Commerce. Now I start talking to the business community in my area. Now I start talking to a lot of people in the organization in the area. Say, listen, my name is Jane Doe, John Doe, and we're looking for people to join, or someone to join our board, and we'd really like to have someone who's a kind of a change agent, or strategic thinker, and you get a couple of names. Not before you could, now you have a conversation with people, and let's assume now you out of those three that you like them all, but one happens to be a CPA, and you say, wow, we already have 4 CPAs. Well, I don't think you need a 5th. But if you say, actually, they're all, the competencies are good, but there's a skill that we don't have. The skill, in my opinion, comes second. The competency comes first, is what I'm getting at. Now, you can kind of collect and rank suggested candidates according to those attributes. You can discuss with your board or board governance committee, which I recommend you have. And again, you invite those highly ranked people to meet with your board members and then discuss potential interest in serving on the board. But where most of us automatically go out and look at, skills that we need this type of person, meaning we need a lawyer, we need a social worker, we need someone who knows social media. There's nothing wrong with those at all. But I think if you think about the idea of about competencies that one needs, you'll get far. So if you move to the next slide, Michelle, if you don't mind. Okay, now, again, nominating people that you are acquainted with is appropriate, and I encourage it. However, high-performing nonprofit boards consist of individuals who are first and foremost recruited based upon their agreed characteristics or incompetencies or personal attributes, followed by the professional skills. Now, as Michelle introduced me as a 30-year with experience. I'm glad she skipped 10 years because I feel a lot younger that she made that nice introduction for me. But I think if you think about it, and when I teach this all over the country, we have online courses that all these organizations work with, teaches us. But competencies is a unique set. And then if you have the competencies, the rest is sort of easy. And you certainly, teamwork, culture, who gets along with people. But it's just different mindset that you may have. And maybe you've thought about this in the past, but maybe in recruitment, now it's not technically part of the discussion, but I also think that you should have a board reappointment process, and those criteria should be approved by your board ahead of time. So before people are reappointed another term, you have criteria. And those are basically things like you agree to be 75, 80% of the meetings, you agree to serve on a committee, you agree to be an ambassador in the community, and you agree to make a gift and everything. But I wanted to focus on the second thing here about the idea of competencies, which most people don't think about. Well, Michelle, we can move on to the next one. So before, everybody knows this. I mean, listen, there are thousands of books, and everybody, there's conferences all over the country on philanthropy, and there's webinars on grant making and grant writing and major gifts and special events and donor software system, and yet everybody struggles. Few people don't struggle. So before I get into solutions or about how to create a culture of philanthropy, which may be different for you, again, just comes from my experience, is I'm just going to play a little game here a little bit, and because obviously we're in the virtual reality. I'm not in your room kind of with you, but I'm not asking you to respond and unmute yourselves and answer this, but I'm going to ask you something, and then I'll show you. No, why do you think people give money? If you had a thought why people give money, most times people would say that they want to give to our mission, they want to do something good, and the answer is yes. Most people said that maybe they want to give for tax reasons. It's not really high in the research, but it has a big impact, clearly. And yes, people give because they give to someone that they trust and respect. And the number one reason people give is because someone asked them. It's this very simple thing. Someone asked them. It's like it didn't just come down from the heavens. And I'm a believer in prayer, but sometimes it's more than prayer. You actually have to ask. But there's two things that I want to emphasize more than ever before. And now, Michelle, we go to the next slide. So yes, people give because they've been asked. Absolutely, it's amazing how it works. Whether it's asked in person, asked in a note card, asked in an email, in a text message, but people ask, and I'm fortunate if I can give and people ask me, and I think it's appropriate, and I know the organization, but I wouldn't have given if they weren't asked. But there's two things that are really, really important that have developed, certainly over the past 10 years, that can distinguish your organization as this. People give to success, not to distress. Number two, and they give to the needs of those you serve, not your organizational needs. So if you understand all the other reasons about why people give money, but you understand, if you come away with nothing else, listen to a guy with a Jersey accent who talks fast, and I have a mixture of Jersey and Boston because my mother's from Boston, so I have a little bit of tactica, I have it, yeah, a little bit, not a lot, a little bit still left here. But if you think about people give to success, so the question becomes, how do you communicate your success? And they give to the needs of those you serve, not your organizational needs. So if you're talking about your organizational needs, you're missing it. So I want to give you a true story that I have all these stories I've collected over, I won't tell how many years, but I'm a young looking 95-year-old guy. No, I'm only kidding. I'm a young looking 70-year-old guy. So an organization I dealt with 15 years ago was involved, it was a women's organization that dealt with sexual assault, domestic violence, very tough stuff. And they wanted a workshop on philanthropy. And I said, in front of it, I said, that's it, not leadership, not governance, no, just, I said, okay. And the board chair had a restaurant, and it was across the street from a very famous courthouse where the Charles Lindbergh kidnapping baby trial was held. And I remember asking him up front, could you tell me your two top achievements this past year? And there was dead silence. Now, I didn't know anybody on this board. There was one board member that knew one of my board members, but that was about it. And a woman said, we did our budget on time. And I literally, had to try to keep my face from showing exasperation. And another woman said, we only spend 6% of our money on fundraising. And I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, it's gonna be a very long night. A woman in the back of the room raises her hand and says, Dennis, we do a program called PALS, P-A-L-S. I said, what is that? She goes, it stands for peace, an alternative learning system, because we treat children who've been subjected to domestic violence, sexual assault, we treat them so they can have healthy relationship again with parents, parent surrogates, teachers, classmates, therapists, whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, grand slam home run, bottom of the ninth inning. I said, amazing achievement. I said, how do you communicate? How do you let your stakeholders know that? They said, we don't do a good job. I said, that's why you're not raising money. So one of the things that's very important to know in terms of creating a culture of philanthropy is you understand that people give the success. The question is, how do you communicate the success, the impact you're having? And particularly, how do you communicate the needs of those you serve? Michelle, look at the next slide that I have one to talk about. If I can. Okay. So you can see I asked them about the achievements here. So I'd ask you, how does your organization communicate your success? Now, there's two types here. There's what I call the tin cup theory of fundraising, and which explains this here. So it's feelings like begging. Now, I'm sure if I ask this to either yourself as a CEO or board members, how many of you, don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you would rather have a root canal than raise money? And how many of you, I see someone laughing, but I'm not going to say the person's name up there. And how many of you have board members that would rather have stick pins in their eyes and raise money? Most people, the answer is yes. It's a very unnatural, uncomfortable feeling. Okay. And why is it? Why is it unnatural? Why is it so uncomfortable? It's uncomfortable because of fear of rejection, because I'm asking to give for the organization I'm part of, and I feel personally rejected. And so, when I was a little boy, my mom used to take me with my brothers to New York City to go see the Christmas show at times, if she had any money. And we went to the big bus terminal in New York City, if you haven't been to the Port Authority. And who was always outside the Port Authority was this disheveled-looking guy, kind of looks like disheveled like me, sitting on a cardboard box, selling pencils in a tin cup. And to a lot of us, we view this as begging. It's very uncomfortable, awkward. But if we think not in terms of fundraising as a transaction, as stop thinking about funders, or we start thinking about investors, talking about at your board meetings, the successful impact you've had on families and children and individuals, the difference you made in the life for those with developmental intellectual disabilities. And the best way of doing that is have them tell their own story, and on your homepage of your website, nothing else but bring people to your board meeting and say, because of this organization, we're rocking and rolling. We're doing well. We have a tendency in our business, and I'm with you. We're in the same business here, right? I mean, I get it. I'm your colleague and brother in this process here. Nobody went into the nonprofit business. Very few went in to make money, and very few went into so they can start touting their horn. Went into it very mission-driven, value system, mission-driven. Fine, nothing wrong with that. But today, when I was a 38-year-old CEO, I knew that if I worked for a Catholic hospital at the time, and I just reported to the head world nun, very powerful woman, by the way, more powerful than the Pope. She ripped the Pope apart if she had to. And as I say, sister, if we don't market ourselves, all the prayers in the world ain't gonna help. So today, something very uncomfortable is that we have to communicate our success. So if you learn that people give to success, and you communicate your success, meaning the impact, and particularly those you serve, yes, you might need a building, you might need this here, but people will give, but you communicate your success. So if you find, and here's what happens, your board members have a different mindset. Most people want their boards to be asking for money. And I'm going to tell you in a second, I don't want them to do that because they're going to do a terrible job here. But if we can transform our boards to stop thinking about it's a transaction, I need everybody to ask people for money. Now, it's one thing, it's fine to ask your board to help get sponsorships for a special event. It's fine. Don't have 10 special events. Everybody's got a wine tasting, a 5K, a 3K, a 2K, whatever, and it gets overdone. You spend half your time raising money and you get half the results. But if we think about ourselves as the social impact for people that we are, and every day, all the struggles you're having and all the struggles you are having and had and the families are having with COVID-19, and the success you're having and had, and communicate that success, and now people who are on your board start thinking about being part of that, they're going to want to also invest in success. Michelle, if you go to the next slide if you can, second. I want to see where it's at. No, go back the other one here. Okay. So, so before we get to this, so I think it's really important to understand creating a culture of philanthropy is needed. But you all know this, that most people struggle with this. And I was, whatever, in my career, and not here to talk about, I raised a fortune, a lot of millions and millions of dollars. And I did it just because I was communicating how our success. And one of the hospitals I worked for had a real serious inferiority complex. They just didn't view themselves very, very well. And I said, you got to be kidding me. You guys are great. So part of the culture, part of the challenge of philanthropy is creating culture of philanthropy. But here's something that's really important is that if you move away from the tin cup to the investment theory, it's not talking about your success to your board, it's contagious. So here's something else you need. Now to go to the next slide, Michelle, if you don't mind. So I called it a tri-partnership. Okay, now you can call it the three-legged stool. The board chair has a role, the CEO or executive director has a role, and your development officer, director of development, whatever you call him or her, if you have one, the three-legged stool. Too often, unfortunately, we hire people to be in development office and we wonder, oh, how come they're not raising money by themselves and how come they leave every 2 years? So let's talk about the role that I think these three parties need to have to create a true culture of philanthropy. Okay. So what do I believe is the role of the CEO? I think today CEO stands for Chief External Officer. I think it stands for Chief Entrepreneurial Officer. I think today you're the sales officer, you're the relationship builder, you're the brand builder. And as you know this quite well, I know I'm talking to my colleagues here. In the corporate world, what I was, the chairman of the board or CEO was one of the same. And the chairman of Microsoft, when Steve Jobs was at Apple and all the places, the chairman CEO is the people in the community know it. In the nonprofit world, it's very rarely is it your board chair, it's a CEO. So the CEO real true job should be, besides everything else, being the chief communicator, relationship builder, sales officer, selling the organization's successes and challenges and being honest with it. And being part of cultivation, solicitation. But that's what I want the role of the CEO to be. I want him to be the chief external officer. Next, Michelle. Now, what's the role of the development officer? I want them to build a diversified fundraising plan. Yes, there's a component for an annual appeal, stuff you already know, and grants writing. But here's something I'm going to ask you, all of you. Do you have any idea how much money, even last year, total giving in the U.S., how much money was given in the United States in philanthropy? And again, if we're live and we could say, I don't know, a trillion, a billion, a million, and people have no idea. Just think for a second, how much money you think is giving philanthropically every year? How if I told you was $430 billion this year, $430 billion? And how about if I told you that, where do you think that money comes from? So a lot of people think it comes from corporations and foundations. It's 15, 20% max. 15 to 20%. 10% may come from planned giving. I mean, planned gifts, bequests, estates. 70%, 70. It's my age. I can't forget that's my age. 70% of total giving comes from individuals or families. 70%. So the question is, if 70% is where the money comes from, and you're in your organizations, how much of your money is coming from individuals and families versus how much is coming from just corporations, foundations, grants? So the role of a chief development officer, he or she should be putting together a diversified plan, should be certainly have a case for support that's emotionally grabbing, compelling as to why someone should give. And more importantly, people don't think about this, how does the donor benefit? You always wonder, how does the donor benefit? It's not just how you benefit, how the donor benefit. So, and their job, simply is an educator, but the quarterback. He or she should be quarterbacking the process and building prospect relationships. But it's not cultural philanthropy is not a department. So when people come into your organization and say, where's the development office? You can say, well, up there on the third floor next to quality assurance. Yeah, it's a department of people. But if we have it just as a department and we don't make it a culture, we're going to be at short. And I think that the world we live in today with federal, state, county, and local funding deficits, this is where we're at. And there are people, in spite of what's going on today, that will contribute to you. So now, next piece here. So the role of the board. Now, I have a little different approach to this, if I can. So here's what I want board members to do. I want them to commit to work with me as a CEO or you as a CEO, whatever. I want you to commit to help me cultivate a minimum of 3 relationships a year, maybe 5, but 3. I don't care if it's an individual, a family, a corporation, or a foundation. I want a board member to help me take the lead role and cultivate a relationship. Just cultivating, introducing us to them. So if I have 10 board members, 10, I then have 30 potential prospects it's going to help me cultivate. I don't want my board asking for money, with few exceptions. They're going to ask, they don't know how to ask, they're not trained, they're going to ask for too little, they're going to accept too little. I'm not joking with you that I've asked for a lot of money and turned down big gifts because I knew I could get more. Now, I'm not here to talk about, but so most people, I want my board to be asking. I don't want you to. You know what? They'll be cheering you because they're too uncomfortable doing it here. Now, so but I want them, number one, I want them to be an ambassador. On their professional LinkedIn file, do they indicate they serve on your board? They should. Is their name, not a contact, but is their name and role on your board? So you brag about them. Are they helping you identify people that can contribute? Or are they making a gift themselves here? If your whole board is not making a contribution annually to yourself, no one else is going to give you, nor should they give you. And this idea, well, I give my time, is garbage. Forget about it. It doesn't matter. I also don't believe there should be, I don't believe there should be a give or get number. And I'll just tell you why. Give or get numbers, the get becomes a ceiling. So if you say, I'm going to make it up, it could be small, it could be larger, but making this up. You say the role on your board is to help us give or get $10,000. If someone can help you get $10,000, they're done. But I have something else here. I had a, way before I took over that client that we talked about what was your biggest achievement, they created a give or get. And the one person who was the most respected in the community was the pastor of the local Presbyterian church. He dropped off the board because he couldn't make the contribution. And I'm like, what were they thinking? What were they thinking? So I don't believe in give or get, but I do believe that you have to give financially up to your means. And I don't care if it's $100 or $500 or whatever it can be. You have to make a gift. So the 3 tripartnership is there's a role for the CEO to play, being the relationship brand builder, chief external officer, someone that people know in the community, who's a thought leader, who's respected. A development officer who's going to help quarterback all this process here and be an educator and handle all the day-to-day and software and all this stuff. And the board, I want them to help me cultivate a relationship. I don't want them asking. As the CEO, I'll ask, or my development's going to ask, but few, if they ask for $1 million and someone gives them $1,000, they'll take it and be happy and be done with it. So I don't want them to do that here. And so if we think about creating culture of philanthropy, and we move away from the tin cup to the investment theory and start thinking about this, start seeking investors, not just funders. And in today's world, by the way, there's a lot of people who will invest in one of your programs. So can imagine having, I'm just making this up here, but having a program for, adult education in one of your housing adult residency programs and having a local company put their name on it. That's money goes right to your bottom line. So that's where they are. Let's go to the next piece if we can, Michelle. Okay. So I want to ask this. This is the questions that you should ask yourselves and your board. And this would be a good board meeting to have this. What value do you provide to the community? Board members should be able to articulate this. If someone was to ask them at a meeting and they stuttered, they mean, so what is it? What's the value? And not just about the things you do, not just the programs you do, but the impact you do. And again, like what are your top achievements? What are they? And last but not least is, why is your organization worthy of a gift? And it's not because you need the money. But why are you worthy of a gift? So those are kind of discussions to have here. So we started first, obviously, with the tin cup and the investment theory, but this is these are parts of culture. So next, Michelle, we get the next topic. So one of the challenges that a lot of organizations have is board leadership succession. I hear my landscapers are outside, and so I live in a development, so if you hear a lot of zzz, it's the blowers here. So let's talk about board leadership succession here. Next slide, Marcel. So I always believe that and I use the term board chair, many of you use board president, they're the same thing to me. It doesn't matter to me, okay? I think it's the board chair's job, the moment they become chair, to start thinking about who's their successor. I think they start to have a beginning discussions with potential candidates regarding their interest in the role. I think the one thing that's amazing is to identify the type of training or coaching these candidates might need themselves. It's amazing to me because we do a tremendous amount of executive search for CEOs and C-suite positions around the country. We do a tremendous amount of board leadership training, but it's amazing to me how in around the country, there's no requirement for board training to be on a board, but if you're on the Board of Education, most states are required to have board training to be on the Board of Education. I think it's also, unless we had a situation, a client, we actually just recruited a board president, a voluntary board president from the outside, which was different reasons, but with few exceptions, you try not to bring someone else from the outside to be on your board here. But those are things you want, but those are challenges. Next, Michelle. So one of the things you want to think about is if you're not having ongoing training for your board throughout the year, maybe every component of one of your board meetings, you have some form of governance aspect or discussion, either yourself as a CEO or through video or an online course or to a speaker or whatever. And certainly, to a lot of people offering your chair-elect, maybe yourself as your most recent board chair retiring to be maybe a mentor or a coach for finding somebody. But something else is that you got to make the job being a board chair a high profile. If you're not rewarding and recognizing people on the board, it becomes like, if it becomes a thing that says, I would rather slit my throat than become the board chair of this organization, it's not going to help in here. So there's some aspects here. Next slide, Michelle. Is certainly, I would recommend once you as a board chair, or you're talking to your board chairs, I don't know if any members on the call that are actually board members, but I think it's important to kind of, have them participate in a wide array of activities, having someone, potentially someone who you think could succeed you or your board chair, have them certainly chair a committee, chair a strategic planning committee, et cetera. I think the more you build this culture of success, based upon the 5 key characteristics we're talking about today, I think the more successful your organization is, the more profile the community is, the easier it's going to be to find somebody on the board chair. I think it's important to reward and recognize people that served on your board. There's all kinds of ways of doing it, but I think it's really important to recognize if someone wants to have it. Many of you have no problems with finding people to be on the board. Maybe some of you have no problems finding somebody to do board chair. Board president's great. But many of you struggle with it. And so you want to be making the role of the board chair something very special. Now, I'm not saying you can do this to everybody, but back in my medical center days, and back then, every person who was the board chair was a man. I'm not sure what it is anymore. I've been out of there for 16 years. But I knew that I wanted to keep in touch with them. I knew I wanted to be able to rely upon them. They were pillars in the community. So I created the Chairman's Club. I had someone design a logo. I bought them all sports blazers. I had an annual dinner with their spouses, and they all could walk into the country club feeling so proud of themselves to have the logo and Chairman's Club. But find a way, just recognize them at a board meeting, inviting everybody to a dinner to recognize them. But, don't take it for granted they've been the board chair, board president, and don't thank them. It's a very challenging job, and it does take a lot of time to do it well. And so I want to go over some things why people don't want to do this. Michelle, next slide, please. Okay. So what are the, so that's kind of what you should do, but what are the realities as to why sometimes it's very difficult? One is just perception that it just takes too much time and too much work. I don't have it. Or there's just, this organization has so much politics and bureaucracy. Or there's a founding board. I have a client that is 100 years old. It's almost as old as me. It's 100 years old. And in their bylaws that the founder was a judge, founded this wonderful nationally highly reputable home for, for boys and young men that have behavioral challenges. Someone in the family has to be on the board. And so the grandson's on the board. But the grandson has been there on the board a long time, and no disrespect to anybody, but sometimes you got to step off here. So, or you can just get politics that it's the same old, same old. And sometimes people just feel I don't feel prepared to be the board chair. I don't have the time. I don't know what you know. And again, if there's few rewards and recognition, people say, why am I put myself out there? So those are some of the challenges you have here, but they're all can be overcome by starting with understanding that it's an investment for people to make, and to be successful, to sustain your organization in challenging times and get ahead. Obviously, not only certainly do you need to have a high level of CEO and board engagement, not only do you need to be able to have how to recruit people effectively, so you have the right composition of board. Not only do you need, obviously, to create a culture of philanthropy, to have the financial resources, but the fourth thing here is the ability to have a board chair. And I'm sure as CEOs, it can be, it's a blessing to have a great relationship with a board chair or board president, and I've been blessed with many. And I was also had the experience once when I had someone who was a vice chair, who was terrific. By the time this person became chair of the board, his personality changed. He had lost his position with a company, and he was a different person, and it was very challenging. And I always tell people, just because someone's your vice chair, just don't automatically make him your chair. So that's kind of that was. So that's going on. If we can move on, Michelle, to the next topic here. Okay. So, I'm sorry, a few more things. You complain you don't have go back. One more. Okay, that's it. Stay right there. So we talk about competencies. Right? We talk about competencies you want on the board. If you don't recruit for leadership, how will you expect someone to step up to be the board chair? I can't tell you how often that happens. It's like no one wants to be the board chair. Well, if you didn't recruit someone to be a pitcher on your team, or a shooter on a basketball team, or a goalie on a hockey team, if you didn't recruit anybody in a position, how would you expect to win? So, I mean, it's just common sense. So some of the obstacles is that when your board is not properly structured, or board roles are poorly formed, the board chair says, I don't want that job. It's like I'm like herding cats. When the board chair hasn't groomed somebody, when they haven't wanted to relinquish control, when no one on the board ever discussed during his or her term at there. And I saw it, but leadership potential was never discussed with recruited people. So there are legitimate factors, but nothing can be overcome. So CEO engagement, board recruitment, board chairmanship, culture philanthropy, 4 of the 5 characteristics I think you need to make your organization successful. And the next one, if we can, Michelle. All right. I keep forgetting. So here's the questions for you to take home with. Think about it. How is your board addressing leadership succession? Do you provide any form of ongoing board training? Do you reward and recognize board leadership? And what difficulty, if anything, is your organization having identifying a new chair? And just remind you, you're going to get all these slides, and you're going to get the voice recording for all this here, and I'm going to give you something else soon in a second here, which is this here. Everybody who registers for this webinar today can email me for a free 30, 45 minutes. I don't care, an hour. You want my time to ask a question about your organization, I'm happy to provide it free. I don't care if you want you by yourself, you and 4 board members. I don't care what you want. If you email me, I will find time to have a personal conversation with you about your own challenges for free. And I don't look at my watch. Okay. Now, last but not least here Thankful we have a board, thankful they help us out here. And it's time to think about the last characteristic, which is measuring and evaluating your board's performance. Now, that's a tough one. By the way, on my website, DennisCMiller.com, there is a ton of free webinars, free articles, and blogs that I've written, okay? And I'm going to make something else for you because of my commitment to Anchor. If you go onto my website and you see any one of my 5 books, I will send you any one of my books for free. Just tell me which book you want. And if you really feel you want 2 of them, tell me what book you want. I'll get them out to you for free. No, just as a friend and favor because of what you do, okay? And so it's just something to think about. But I always tell people this, good boards evaluate their CEO. Great boards evaluate themselves, and it takes courage. So one of the articles I wrote not too long ago, this past year, is the nonprofit CEO dilemma. How do I ask my board to improve their performance? It's a challenge since they hire fire. So let's move on, Michelle. How do we do this? Hey, I said it. Good boards evaluate their own performance. It's like it's assessment here. And and another article that's just coming out is about the best culture one can have in a nonprofit is the culture of learning, an ongoing culture of learning, and make it fun and exciting. I've seen boards struggle. I've seen boards that I call them trauma cases because of my work in medical center for so long. I've seen boards just come alive, thrive with some energy, with just a little bit of advice and suggestions. It's amazing. Just a little bit of touch of love, as they say. Like a little water on that plant can come a long way here. Next slide, Michelle. So a couple of things here. There's no, there's questionnaires that you can fill out, and you can have an answer 1 to 5 and whatever here. And there's organizations that provide board assessment tools. The problem with most of them is this: at best, they give you a score on 20 different categories. They give you a score, and it says your score is 3.5, and the other 100 we assess have a score of 3.1. So you go, oh, great, we're 4 points better than they are. Do you know anything about those other organizations? No. Do you have recommendations of how to improve the things you're not doing well? No. Okay. So you can engage an outside professional facilitator to come in and actually do the assessments. You can have assessment tools and open-ended questions. Ask people. Don't ask questions yes or no. Ask them open-ended questions. You can engage both leadership and the board's perspective on it, okay? And seek recognition for improvement here. So there's a lot of things you can do. My whole purpose today is I'm not here to sell you on ourselves, that we sell by ourselves here. One of the things we have on our website, under Dennis C. Miller, under this, we do, again, executive search, but under the Center for Nonprofit Leadership and Board Performance, there's a drop-down box. One of the things we have is a tool called the Executive Leadership and Board Governance Online Assessment Tool. You have both the board and the executive team, which means as the CEO, everybody reports to me. We will evaluate the organization in 8 categories. We have a chance to give input into ourselves and each other. How does the board view the leadership team and vice versa? It's all anonymous. And on top of that, then we give you not only an hour consultation on your answers and a full report, but we give recommendations on what you can improve. And the total cost is only $975. And I don't care if you have 25 board members. And so I'm familiar with all the leadership tools that are out there. Also, we have, beyond the scope here, we have CEO evaluation tools that the board can evaluate the CEO, but the CEO can do a self-evaluation, and it's also for $975. We have, if you take a look at, Michelle, go to the next slide, please, if you can. Okay. So the question I want to ask all of you is, does the board evaluate your CEO? Does your CEO evaluate you? And if you're doing a board assessment, is that process asking open-ended questions or yes or no? And are you interested in maybe measuring your own level of engagement and performance? And more importantly, what are your strengths? Because it's important to know your strengths, but it's also important to know some areas of improvement here. And I know a lot of people get defensive about, well, I mean, I'll give you my time and effort. I'm on a committee. I got to be assessed. Give me a break here. You're going to embarrass me. I'm the president of my local bank. I mean, it's, well, really, you're not above having feedback. Okay. So, I mean, so the 5 key areas that I think from, again, I've had, Michelle said 30. Michelle, I think we went from, I had 25 years experience and then we went to 35. I skipped 30. I just forgot those years. And now I've been saying 35, 35, 35. And I have to start probably admitting at least by January, it's 40 years of experience, but I don't want to do it just yet, I always take people seriously. I feel like I'm 39, though I realize my body is a 1954 truck. I've got 4 parts replaced. I've got, upholstery, the transmission replaced, I got all that stuff here. But, so I think it's important to summarize here if we can. Michelle, next slide, just before we get to it. Okay, hold on. So summary. Common sense. You do great jobs. I know the challenges you have and the difficulty you have. And I thank you, bottom of my heart, for all the work you do. Thank you. But there's 5 things I think that if you come away with any tips at all to make yourself a strong organization, high-level board CEO engagement, invite your board to be your partner in leadership. Invite him, participate in the process. Get him. Don't just ask him this. Don't get it. The board is like all in favor, say aye. Not just approval. Understand about board recruitment. Make sure you have the level of competencies. Change your mindset about philanthropy from, we got to give, we got to raise money, and no one wants to do it, and stick it all. It's like asking your board to raise money. It's like asking your 30-year-old son and daughter if they're still living home. Mom and I talked about, we think you should get married. We want you to go to the mall this weekend and ask someone to get married. Could you imagine how embarrassing that? I mean, come on, walking around, the big stores and say, I got to find a spouse. That's how it's about. No one felt like doing it. So change your culture. Recruitment, culture philanthropy, board succession, and measuring. Oh, how do we get better unless we measure ourselves? And this should be organization-wide. So I just wanted to have a chance to, introduce you to ourselves here today. I encourage you to go online and look at our tools, which are a lot, and everything we do is made affordable. I also want to say this to you. I want to take some questions now, if you have questions. I want to offer any of you that wants a free consultation with me at any time. It'll be after Thanksgiving. I'm happy to do it. I mean, I don't care what zone you're in, and just confidential. I'm happy to do it. And again, I always tell people, if Mrs. Fritz, my 7th grade English teacher, knew I wrote 2 sentences together on the same piece of paper, she'd have a heart attack. If she knew I wrote 5 books, she'd have a triple heart attack and go back to her grave. Okay, I mean, the idea that I would be an author when I was a kid is mind-boggling. Okay, so I want to take some questions right now, if we can. Anybody with questions?
Well, I got one, Dennis, through the a private chat. Someone asked, how do I deal with a board that doesn't, looks like they're concerned that the board isn't aware that they need training, that they seem to think that they're doing just fine. How would as a chief executive, how would you recommend dealing with that?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think it's a very common situation. It's for a lot of boards to feel they don't need any training here. So a couple of things here. If you feel they're working well, you don't want to provide them any training, but I think that you may want to cut out an article or 2 that's out there about board training. You would ask this here. Every physician that board member sees for their own medical care, those physicians are constantly getting training. Their CPAs are constantly getting training. Their attorneys are constantly getting training. The plumber that had to come to my house today to take the dishwasher out so a guy can fix the flooring gets training here. What's wrong with training? What's wrong with having a chance to be in a learning environment where what's wrong with encouraging us to learn about what other people do and say, you know what, we did it that way. So the challenge is to say, put it back to them and say, well, what would be wrong about finding out how the other world lives? What would be wrong with finding out about, go to the other side of the mountain and find out, oh my God, there's sunshine there. Oh my God, there's water there. We didn't think there was. So I think the challenge just is that what maybe you ask the question is, hey, what do other people do? Anchor has, I'm sure, an annual conference, and we may be participating soon. But it's a fair question, but I think it's really important to have a discussion about um, who's not getting training in this world, who's not trained, who's not seeking training, who's not learning. I mean, why would we not want to be learning about new possible ways of doing things? How many of you all thought about recruiting board members based upon competencies? Probably not many between you and me. So that's my response, Michelle.
Another question is how, what suggestions would you have for handling training for a board that seems to be kind of overworked and overburdened already? How might they work that into their already stressed
Yeah,
schedule?
yeah, that's a good question. I think a couple of things here. I kind of would like to know more about why is this board overworked and kind of spent out. I mean, why is the board so involved? It sounds like the board's involved with management. Something that's not right there to me. Okay, so it's very hard to ask, the coal miner who's come out of the coal mine spending 16 hours, drilling coal in West Virginia to say in the next 2 hours, I want you to go up to headquarters and get class training on the new drills. So I'd have to know more about it. I mean, training should be to improve our lives, to make our lives easier, not harder. And so I don't think it should ever be like a mandate type thing. I think it should be one that is just an open for discussion. But I'd have to know more in person about why they're feeling so overwhelmed. I don't know the answer to that. Okay.
Okay, well, it's a small group today. I've got one more question.
Okay.
How would you, going back to the idea of philanthropy, and encouraging boards to give, how would you handle the argument or not handle the argument, but how would you handle the issue of at what level people should, board members should be giving? What would
Okay.
be some good guidelines?
Well, different people have different opinions. I'll give you my own opinion. Okay, and I'll give you an example though. So, as a ranger, I think people should give what they feel in their heart they can give. That's a good gift. This period. I don't have a dollar amount. So there's some people literally that maybe they can give $100, which is like 50 cents a day. And if you can make a gift of $100 and that's what you can really afford, then that you should look in the mirror and say, fine. Everybody should be able to look in the mirror and kind of be able to say what they can give their own way. I don't believe in give and get. Now, I do think it's important to understand that if people don't make a financial contribution, it's hard to ask anybody else to make a financial contribution. Whereas if you don't love yourself, why should I love you? Right? So if you don't love yourself, why should I love you? And so if you're not giving to yourself, why should you give to you here? I think, though, it's a misnomer to blame our boards. I think one of the great things about our country, among other great things, is the high level of volunteerism of people serving on the board. However, we don't do a good job, and that's all of us as CEOs, no disrespect. We don't do a good job of training and explaining what our roles and responsibilities are. So I just ask you to give what you can. So I'll give you an example, something differently, but we had back in my medical center days, we a lot of things were very political in a political state like New Jersey. And we got behind one person who was running for governor. And we created a political action committee. And we had asked everybody on our board, and again, we were not the town we were in was wealthy, but the county was a wealthy town. It's where Far Hills Race and Jack Onassis lived, and all these well-to-do people. And we asked every board member to come to this dinner we have for a governor, a candidate for governor, to give $500. And we wanted to be able to say we had them. But one day, when the board members came to me, and he was a physician, I remember it like yesterday. He said, Dennis, I know you think we all make a lot of money, but we don't. I'm a family practitioner. I don't make them. I don't have $500 to give you. And I remember, I said, Richard, I'm sorry. I just wish you would have told me. Just, give me it. Come, just don't worry about it. Give, come. So if you can't make a financial contribution and you're unemployed right now, it's understandable. But I want people to feel like that if you don't care about what you do, if you're not prepared to make not just time investment, but your own financial investment at whatever you can do, that's acceptable to me. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, well, that wraps up the questions. So I hope everybody will come and visit your website and take advantage of all of the materials you have available, the blogs, the webinar recordings. There's just an awful lot of information there.
And Michelle, we just all of you, we will get something out to you in a couple of days.
Yes.
And everybody, please, if you want to, I'm not required. You probably, some people said I had enough of this guy for the past hour here. But if anybody would like to have a free consultation with me, and I'm not selling something, I'm happy to give you whatever 2 cents I can give you. Feel free to reach out to us for anything you need. Take advantage of our services, and they're very affordable, and they're helping you. And you want one of my books, I'll even give it to you. So just take a look at it all. There's a lot of free stuff, other webinars, articles, and blogs. I've been at this a long time. I've helped a lot of organizations, or one successful organization. I've been helping a lot of clients. So I want to thank all of you. I want to thank you for what you do. I want to thank you, Lynn. I want to wish you all a very happy, hopefully healthy and carefree Thanksgiving, and we'll be in touch real soon. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Lynn, my pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Kyla. Bye-bye.